3 years ago, the Howard government rewrote Australia's family laws. The reforms championed shared care for children in separated families, based on the idea that most were better off spending as much time with each parent as possible. But is that correct? The Attorney-General's announced 2 inquiries into how the laws are operating, with particular focus on protecting children from violence. And as Lateline reveals tonight, research commissioned by the Attorney-General suggests children involved in separations featuring serious conflict aren't doing well under shared care. Tikki Fullerton reports.
A male in that vehicle has taken a young girl, we believe to be 4 years of age, and dropped her over the bridge, and she's landed in the water.
The parents of the little girl, Darcy Freeman, never got to court over their custody arrangements, but the Westgate Bridge tragedy in January this year reached Canberra and helped trigger a federal inquiry.
Do not give up.
Last month, a nationwide rally by women's groups claimed the law has swung too much in favour of fathers ahead of the rights of the child.
According to men's groups, the 2006 legislation puts the child's rights first, does it?
No, I don't believe it does. In fact, I think it's done the opposite.
The 2006 shared parenting laws require that judges apply a presumption of shared parental responsibility, except where violence or abuse is an issue. What's more, the court is obliged to consider parents also share equal time with their children, if at all possible. The shared parenting laws have powerful critics, among them Alistair Nicholson, who spent 16 years as Chief Justice of the Family Court.
I think the problem with it is it treats children as objects rather than as people. What it's really saying is not much about the desires, the needs, the interests of the child. What it's talking about are the desires and the needs and interests of the parents.
Last year, 15% of litigated cases and almost 20% of settled cases awarded 50-50 equal time. Many more agreed to shared care at some level.
I think it raised the expectation of fathers considerably, and I think it also created an expectation amongst mothers that they should agree to equal sharing.
What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now!
Intense lobbying from fathers' groups helped deliver the new parenting laws. Desperate fathers shut out from their children's lives, some driven to suicide.
It was harmful to the relationship between the children and their father because it was based on too little time and too little meaningful time.
Oh, there's no doubt that they got the ear of the then Prime Minister, John Howard.
Far too many young boys are growing up without proper male role models, Mr. Speaker.
The new laws deal with all separations, not just the oft-quoted estimate of 5% that end up in court. Many are amicable splits.
They wanted to send a message to the whole community that kids need both parents, that they should at least look at the options for sharing parenting in some way or other. Not necessarily equal time, but involving both parents and children's lives.
But the application of shared care to high-conflict families, including most of those that end up in court, has caused concern in the highest circles.
I made it clear right from the start that this is unlikely, that this kind of wish that parties would have joint arrangements, if they're in the interests of children, would not be the sort of cases that would be coming before the family court. I mean, most of the cases we see are quite dysfunctional families.
This woman, who we'll call Julia, is by no means at the extreme end of high-conflict cases. She says life became untenable shortly after she had a baby.
He dragged me by the hair into the garden because I hadn't put the correct colour pegs on the clothesline, and that escalated to the point where he sexually assaulted me over a period of about 3 or 4 months prior to leaving. When that happened, that first time it happened, I realised I actually didn't know how far he was going to go.
4 weeks before the final hearing, Julia says she was assaulted in front of her son during handover. Lateline has read the judgment in Julia's case, but we haven't spoken to the other side, so this is Julia's story. She says her son does enjoy spending time with his dad, but she's worried about the 5-year-old's exposure to their ongoing violence. And here she's backed by new Australian research. In a study commissioned by the Attorney-General's office, Dr Jennifer McIntosh has been looking at children's development in 130 high-conflict families, some of whom went to court. The study is small, but its data has been running for 4 years.
According to both mothers and fathers, children who have been in shared care arrangements over 3 and 4 years are showing much higher rates of hyperactivity and problems with attention and focus.
Again, the new study reflects Julia's story. The most affected children were subject to rigid court orders for shared care.
Now, to be clear, the children in rigid arrangements that tended to be court-ordered weren't doing very well 4 years ago. However, what we've been able to demonstrate is that the care arrangement hasn't helped. In fact, these children have become more distressed over time.
This one talks about mediation and the family dispute resolution workers.
This study does not look at the thousands of straightforward separations where mediation ensures flexible shared care that may work for children. It's the high conflict cases that are causing alarm. Change has been building from women's groups and in the print media, with tales of what appear to be harsh rulings against mothers. Some of the worst involve relocation of children. In one case, a mother was left little choice but to stay in a remote mining town in a caravan or lose care of her daughter, despite her family support base being Sydney. She argued that the family had only moved there for the father's work a short time before separation, but the magistrate was convinced this was the only way for the child to have a meaningful relationship with the father. Media reports like the Mount Isa case have angered some academics and fathers' groups.
There's been a lot of misreporting in the media recently. There's been a lot of dishonest journalism. There might be 10,000 cases, of which 5 you'd say, well, I wouldn't have done that, or that's shocking. But what about the rest?
My concern with the stories is that most often it gives us only a disappointed or a very concerned mother's view, not the father's view, and, more seriously, not the objective judgment of the magistrate or the judge who heard all the evidence and then made a decision, the decision which is now being criticised.
The former Chief Justice disagrees. He not only believes the media reports reflect a disturbing trend, but that the laws now put children at risk.
Well, I think there's a risk that violence may be overlooked in the quest for shared parenting responsibility, and I think that's one of the problems about the legislation. Yes,
that's a very serious situation.
Absolutely, yes.
One of the most scurrilous things have been levelled against our judicial figures is that they are deliberately placing children in situations of violence or situations that are dangerous.
The most controversial finding tonight is the research in high-conflict families that questions a cornerstone of the shared parenting laws: more time for fathers with their kids.
It follows, Tiki, as night follows day, that time is required for a good relationship. You can't do it in a weekend every fortnight.
We found that there isn't, in this group, a linear relationship between how much time children were spending with their fathers and the quality of that relationship according to the children.
Fathers' groups and women's groups both claim the high ground on research to back their cause. But if Dr McIntosh's research is replicated in bigger numbers, it will be potent ammunition for those seeking change. Expect resistance, though, from those who worked so hard for the shared parenting laws.
We'd lose, again, a whole generation of separated children in terms of their really healthy relationships with not only their fathers, but their mothers too.
Are you going to go back to court?
Not until the laws have changed.
Shared parenting law has worked out very differently for Julia. Can it really cater for the overwhelming number of easy separations and also keep children safe in high conflict? Should it be pushing shared care or returning more power to judges? The government will need the wisdom of Solomon to get the balance right. The many inquiries and investigations report within 12 months. Tiki Fullerton, Lateline.